looks when a chess person's playing, or when a chess player is playing chess. This will be their thought process that I have developed over my time playing tournament chess. The way that it works is that once I get out of my own book, which means out of my opening preparation, and I start seeing things that aren't typical things in the opening, I'm going to do a box breathing test. It's a breathe in for 4, hold it for 4 counts, release it for 4 counts, and then go back into it again. So it's breathe in, hold it for 4, breathe it out for 4, and then hold for 4. What that does is in a classical tournament game, I might do this 4 or 5 different times, and that's to slow my heart rate down. When I'm playing chess, sometimes things get a little anxiety filled, and when your heartbeat is up, you're not thinking clearly. And so the box breathing is a signal to your brain and to your heart to calm things down. Now, after that, then I will seeing exactly what has changed on the board from when my opponent has moved. Will change something. For example, they might have moved a piece that threatens something of mine, but what has changed is that it's no longer defending a key piece or a key square. And so that will be something, is to see what exactly has changed in the dynamic of the position. From there, I will see at what my opponent's threatening. What are they attacking? That is also part of the what has changed. Then I'm going to look and try and find out one that's going to be a thwarting what my opponent's trying to do, and 2 other ones are going to be ways that I can improve a piece or tactic that might show up in the game. So like a knight fork, skewer, pin, everything you can think of. So to have 3 candidate moves, and then from there I will calculate out the different lines, and I typically don't go more than 3 or 4 deep, especially not in a 15-10 game, because I don't have a long time to calculate. Try and calculate it out to where it feels good. If it's something that's intuition based, I will try and point that out, that I feel like this move. And that's kind of the process that I go through. Once I decide on which of my 3 candidate moves that I want to go with, I will do what is called a blunder check. And what I'll do is you'll kind of see me look side, looking someplace away from. I'll do another box breathe. I'll do another 4, 4, 4, 4. And then I look back, I double check that my move isn't a piece or cause some sort of massive blunder. That check is done and the blunder check is finished. If there's a huge blunder that I oversaw the first time, I'll go back to looking at candidate moves. Maybe I'll look at some of the other ones that I looked at and see if those ones work better. Do the blunder check. Once it passes the blunder check, then I will. As you'll see that I have a tablet over here on my right-hand side, and all this has is chess.com on it. Not running an engine, not anything else nefarious, just chess.com on it. And then tell me what my opponent's move is going to be, and then make my move here. You'll see me come over here and make my move on the board over here. Now, with all that being said, I hope that this is something that's as educational for you, my viewers, as it is to me. And let's get into it. Let's get into this week's game. I'm going to be playing as white, so I'm going to start with the English. Now, as we're waiting, the English is kind of a hyper-modern opening. What I like to do is I like to play it to where I don't push d4 and c4, just to keep black out of their known d4 openings that they like to do. This one is I'll be attacking the center. It's not quite occupying the center with pawns like that's in the opening principles, but it does give me some flexibility as far as how I want to occupy the center. So my opponent replies with the reverse Sicilian, which is the e5 versus c4. Now, in the regular Sicilian, you'll have e4 and c5, so that's why it's called the reverse. Now, the big difference between the two, they'll develop their other knight to c6. This is all still within what I'm used to seeing at this stage in the game. So typically at this point, because this bishop hasn't come out, I'm going to try and really occupy her. So what I'm going to do is push e4, and this is still within my opening prep. We'll see what my opponent's going to do here. My opponent did play bishop to c5. Now what this does, this offers up an opportunity to do a known tactic. So is that I will go on by taking the knight takes e5, So go ahead and pause the video right now and see if you can see what the known tactic is. And I'll wait about 10 seconds before I make my move and explain what the tactic is. The tactic is to sacrifice the knight with knight takes e5. Now, if the knight takes back, which happens quite often, then I'm going to push e4, which then forks the knight and the bishop. Let's see if he takes the bait. They're around this, but either way, I'm going to go up a piece. So he takes the bait, and this is when I'm going to come out with d4. Now, what this does is and the bishop, and so one this guy values more. Most people try to save their bishop, and then I can take the knight. I've only had a handful of times when my opponent will actually save the knight instead of the bishop. Now, if my opponent at this point actually decides to castle, which is another decent idea, yeah, I don't know if it's decent, but if he decides to castle and it's my choice, I'm typically going to take the bishop because we were going to have a up on the board, and his bishops would be knights are. So if I have the choice, I want to take the bishop over the knight. I am actually going to turn this thing up so I can hear it when my opponent makes a move. That way I can look at the board. And as you know, with these 15-10 games, sometimes I have a tendency to get into some time trouble because I like to think pretty deeply about the position. And so we'll move before I'm ready because I'm running out of time. And, that happens sometimes. So my opponent's really thinking about what he's going to do here. Maybe he hasn't played against e4 openings. They know how to play e4 openings, but they don't see c4 or knight f3 often. And so me into my wheelhouse, more than black is used to. And part of the reason English, I tip this. You'll typically see me put if I take queen, that will be undefended, which means I'll be able to take this pawn, and then he's going to be up a pawn instead of me. So in this position, I am going to damage my own pawn structure. I am going to play the knight, and now I have a pretty solid center for the most part. I've not quite finished my opening yet and get my pawn or my rooks connected. So my opponent plays his bishop retreat to bishop to e7. And finished. That's probably my number one priority right now is to finish my and get castled. So since we've got this huge aisleway here, what I'm thinking of doing is maybe moving the rook over g1 to pressure the g7 pawn. And the other option that I have is to go ahead and just develop to bishop to e3, which adds additional defense to one. Then I can put my queen, move my queen up development, which is probably going to be the small. Finish my development, and I'm going to be planning on castling queen side for now. Sorry, Kitty. Oh, and so with the bishop to e3, castle queen side. And so since my opponent has went ahead and castled to the king side, now would be a great time for me to consider rook to g1 because that'll on this control over these dark squares. So that one is really enticing me. That's kind of what my intuition is saying. The other move before I make this is to actually go queen to d2, and the purpose of that is to get the queen on the dark squares before I weaken the dark squares. So let's go ahead and do that because I am down to 8 minutes. My opponent still has 11, so we're super pretty good on time. I'm going to, and then I will probably bring this rook. We'll come over here, and then we'll try to start trapped. I mean, yes, he can go here, but then where's he going there? He's not really going to go anywhere. And so at this point, I'm actually out of my opening prep. I've been out for a couple moves, and I haven't processed. So we're going to start working on doing that once my opponent makes his move. Okay, so my opponent played C. First, I'm going to do my box breathings. I'm actually feeling my horizon a little bit because I'm not entirely sure what he's doing, and that's okay. Doing the box breathe will help my logical brain. Okay, so I did my 2 box breathes. What I think my opponent's trying to do is they're either going to go ahead and strike out in the center with d5 to attack my big center, which is what I would think they would do. And the other things that the queen is now able to come out, although I'm not sure where the queen's going to go, that's going to cause too much of a... I do think that this is their big move, is d5. With that being said, if I castle and they play d5, then we can kind of trade off in the center because I've got much bigger... Yeah, let's see. Let's go ahead and castle, see what my opponent's going to do. Because I got a pretty big center, so if they decide to push d5, assuming. With this setup, though, what I'm looking forward to doing is maybe pushing d5 at some point to really open up this center. And he hasn't moved any of these guys yet. The other option, obviously, is I need to get this bishop out. But where's he going to go? And figuring out this double pawn to g1 is still a thing. Okay, so he is now going to try and force through this pawn. Now, I don't really want to weaken my king side too much, or queen side, my king side castle position. Typically, when I see this, I know that b5 is coming. And once we trade off, he's going to try and open up the a file. But I need to beat him to the punch. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and one. And what that does is it puts pressure on my opponent's g7 pawn, with further ideas of maybe going here with the bishop to really put pressure on this g7 pawn. And then also kicking this knight out of here somehow. Maybe by pushing this e5 pawn, which is that, e5. So I should go ahead. So what I'm calculating is if I do this, he pushes this forward, then I can move this guy up. Let's say he comes over here, and then I can get my knight in position. Let's do that. And I will be right back right after these messages. My opponent went ahead and which is not a, but I'm going to put some maximum knight. So bring this guy up with the idea of pushing f4, and I'm trying to make some time that I wait. So obviously this pawn is take this guy. If this king ever goes off of this file, then I'm going to have to make sure to bring my bishop away from danger here. But the big idea is getting rid of this knight. Once this knight's gone, some tactics on the g7 pawn. Do need to be wary some of this diagonal that just jumped out at me. So bishop to g5 at some is going to be a threat to just pin my, especially thing. So it's simple of is bishop to g3 ideas. Let's see what my opponent's going to do here. Okay, so my opponent off of the file here, and so I will need to be very, very careful here. My first intuition is to go ahead and take with check. When he comes back, then I can bring the queen over here, which then pins the knight, and then he's going to have to do something here. So he might come up here, which at that point I can take, got a checkmating threat. So I am running an idea. So my opponent has done what I thought they did with my calculation on this one, which is to put some maximum on here. Now the threat here is I'm going to be checkmating on g7, and the big defense is going to be this bishop to f6 to defend the knight. If that's the case, I take this guy, and we're sitting pretty all right. The other option is if they come here, is to take, rook takes g7, bishop takes g7. No, that doesn't work. Attacking the queen. So this is the big defense, I think. Is there any other things that they can do? I don't see much anything else that he can do to defend against this threat. Obviously, if he goes here to defend, gives the king an escape square. Okay, how do I defend that escape square? I can take the pawn on h7, and that renews the threat. It doesn't renew the threat of anything, so I can take the pawn. It's a free pawn. I can go queen h8, but then the king escapes out to, and they're in the center. I really need to fill e5 off the diagonal. If he goes back here, then I can checkmate. Obviously, if he takes, I take back, and then the check is here again. So I think that's the right move. And I'm down below a minute, and so I'm going to try my best to vocalize what I'm trying to do here. And too thrilling for me. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a agitation here because my opponent still has about 3.5 minutes on our time. Set this bishop so that I can attack. So he went ahead, the two of them, which is going to be not fun for him, not pleasant at all. So where's he going to go here? Knight is pinned. He can't take the pawn because of the fork. He obviously can come here with the queen and check in the king. So he went ahead and went to be check. So if he blocks with the queen to g8 is checkmate. So he decides over. I could really be mean here. I could come here, trade off the queens, but that doesn't seem very helpful. To g7, double up on the g file, down to 43 seconds. So he's which is fine. Go ahead and we'll back the queen off. Back the queen off here. Now what the thought is that we can check the king and the queen and take the queen with the rook. So he's going to have to do something because I've got quite an attack. What he's going to be able to do to stop and get the rook to d1, which ton of pressure on the g file, the queen. So we'll be trading on queen. Let's see, would that be? Yeah, let's do that. One time, so let's. He's gonna honestly was not. I would have resigned in this position. I've got to line these guys up, and I'm just gonna pound, 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 pound. So even if he was to come here, let's just go ahead and play. This is his only move that he has, is this. And so let's say we take here. He takes back. Move here. In this position, I think that a decent move would be this. But honestly, in this, play horribly to lose this position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and see improving. So as I'm setting the board up, I think one of the keys, the decision early on to take with the G pawn. I knew if my opponent decided to castle to the king side, which is what he ultimately did, then it was going to kind of just shoot a rocket launcher at my opponent's kingside position. Ultimately is what decided the game, was that G file. So let's go ahead and see what the game review says. It says that I took advantage of the position. Turn this down, would have all the speed. So I'm not going to give my opponent's name. It doesn't matter what their name is. They played very well. Very proud of them. Here, I am currently rated 1161 on chess.com Rapid. Opponent was rated just over 12. Way to go. You took advantage of the English in position. And I see a tactic that I can use to expect 0.2%. And my opponent did a 72.2%. So honestly, for our level, that's actually pretty average. My opponent, so that's kind of the typically in that 70s to high 90% from everything, because this blocks my queen's attempt to get these dark squares. So go ahead and go back. What my opponent did was obviously the king to f8, and that just opened tactics galore, which actually the engine wanting me to play. Now why is that the better move? So capturing while sacrificing the rook. Let's see what the follow-up is. Okay, so after this. Okay, so we had rook takes g7, takes g7, rook to g1. Then we had the bishop f6, e5, rook takes e bishop, not sacrificing. Instead of taking with the bishop, that just has a ton of initiative. So I still think that playing what I did was probably for me at my level, because, to be honest, I am not making mistakes. And so I still feel like it's not like this is a blunder. It's not. It's definitely not a blunder. It's an okay move, then it's a fine move. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks for the next Thinking Out Loud.